local government units forum in Nanning. The lessons that we learned in the previous years of our visit and interaction with China and other leaders in South Asia and Southeast Asia are indeed have contributed much to what we are doing now in the Philippines. And in my visit in Hechi City in Guangxi, I have seen the investment being done by the local government of Hechi to propagate and for the food security. They have tens of thousands of Black Angus beef or cattle being held in one farm. Now we are replicating that. We are doing our share here in Pangasinan. We have invited local investors to go into cattle farming. We have also seen the demand of our Philippine fruits, more particularly dragon fruit, in the China market. So we have also invited some of our Chinese Filipino businessmen to invest more in agriculture. And I'm happy to report to you that in the provinces of Ilocos Norte and Pangasinan, we have several hectares of land being planted already with dragon fruit. And I would like to invite the good Ambassador Wang Silian, if he has time, or maybe one of his staff to come and see the things we are doing here in Pangasinan insofar as promotion of agriculture, targeting China to be the market of our investors here. As I said, we may have missed the conferences in China today. September 25 is the opening day for the China Sichuan South and South Asia Business Leader Summit. But our missing China would not be in vain indeed, because we are going to hold, as we're holding now, the fourth Zoom meeting of Apcu with no other than two of the wisest leaders in Asia, our former president and chairperson emeritus, Her Excellency President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, and our ambassador of China to Manila, Ambassador Wang Silian, delivering their respective keynote speeches. So again, welcome everyone. Let's hope to learn, and we are sure of learning from the remarks that will be delivered to us by our good keynote speakers. Good afternoon.
Thank you for the opening remarks, Chairman Raul. And now to introduce our keynote speaker, I will call on Mr. Felix Guanzon, Apcu Vice President from Cebu City. Felix.
Good afternoon. Our guest speaker began her career as an economist and a professor of economics at a number of universities in the Philippines, including the country's state university. Even when she was still in the academy, she was already involved in fostering good relations with China more than 40 years ago, an active member of an organization called Association for the Philippine-China Understanding. She had a good fortune to be invited to visit Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Changsha, Hangzhou, Daichi back in 1970s, when China had not yet opened up to the world. Her father, Gustavo Macapagal, was president of the Philippines from 1961 to 1965. Thus, it seemed natural that at some point, some of the senior politicians in the Philippines recruited her to run for senator, and that launched her political career. She was president of the Philippines from 2001 to 2010. From 2010 to 2019, she was a member of the Philippine House of Representatives for 3 terms. She was elected as a member of Board of Directors of the Bao Forum of Asia in April 2018. She served as Speaker of the Philippine House of Representatives in 2018 up to 2019 until the constitutionally mandated in her 3 provisional terms. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest speaker, former President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo.
你声音不是长着啊。
Madam President, Madam President, Madam President, there's something wrong with your audio.
Mm. 时间没事，可能是。
Ma'am, can you hear us?
嗯，我这个好像没关呢，我就开。哎，我的麦克风啊。
President Gloria has some technical difficulties with her audio. Okay. Yes, ma'am. We can ask DTI Secretary Ramon Lopez Jr. to give his message to our Apcu forum this afternoon. Raven. Raven. Secretary Lopez. We can't seem to get Secretary Lopez also.
Ladies and gentlemen, magandang araw
Okay.
ang lahat.
Here.
I am honored to speak before the Association of Philippines-China Understanding today. There is a Chinese saying that a bosom friend afar brings distant lands near. This is an appropriate description of the relationship between the Philippines and China, considering the long history of culture and trade between us. Since President Rodrigo Roa Duterte's first visit to China in 2016, the ties between our two nations has blossomed under his leadership. This has been growing year after year, culminating with the Philippines being declared the guest country of honor at the recent China International Fair for Investment and Trade, or CIFIT, for this year and even in the next. We have also been participating at the China International Import Expo in Shanghai for the past 2 years, and we will join the event again in November this year. The Philippines likewise recognizes the opportunities in services as the next area of growth, which is why we will be part of the China International Fair for Trade in Services in 2020. And with increasing connectivity of China's Belt and Road Initiative, the already booming trade and investment engagements between our two countries will surely multiply further. Meanwhile, China ranked last year as the Philippines' top trading partner, the top export market, and the top import source. Our total bilateral trade valued at 48.6 billion US dollars. Our exports to China grew by 5.7% from $18.4 billion in 2018 to $19.5 billion in 2019. Likewise, our imports from China increased by 14.6% from 25 billion in 2018 to 29 billion in 2019. In terms of approved foreign investments, China remains among the top sources of investments to the Philippines, ranking second in 2019 with $1.7 billion worth of investment pledges. But in 2018, China was our top source of approved foreign investments with 963 million US dollars. Because of this, our Board of Investments has prioritized several sectors that would interest Chinese investors. These include parts manufacturing for electric vehicles, light vehicles, and bicycles, light industries manufacturing, component manufacturing in solar, photovoltaic, electronic, and electromechanical items. There's also the manufacture of building materials, the processing of high-value food and fisheries products, including halal, tourism, and e-commerce. Opportunities as well abound for the basic and heavy industries like the integrated iron and steel industry. With the continuing trust of China to go global, the Philippines can be a complementary country for hosting Chinese manufacturing investments. This will assure a continuously functioning manufacturing supply chain for these investments while being a good fit for the China Plus One strategy being adopted by most companies. To facilitate increased Chinese investments, the Department of Trade and Industry and the China's Ministry of Commerce, or MOFCOM, signed a Memorandum of Understanding on Cooperation on Industrial Parks Development last November 2017. The program for the cooperation in industrial parks development was subsequently signed in November 2018 during the state visit of President Xi Jinping to the Philippines. Under this program, we will have industrial parks hosting Chinese investment projects in the Philippines. The first project to be rolled out is the proposed 500-hectare industrial park in New Clark City. The project proponents, Bases Conversion Development Authority, and the China Gezuba Group Company are now in the final stage of the lease agreement discussion. With this increasing number of investments in industrial projects from China, we will strengthen our capacity to serve both domestic demand and the growing exports to China and other international markets. More importantly, we will generate more jobs and employment in fulfillment of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte's dream of giving all Filipinos a better quality of life. Let me also note that the strong historical link and friendly relations between the Philippines and China indicate a strategic complementation between our economies. Both countries have a huge domestic market base due to large populations, even as talent availability remains a key advantage for both the Philippines and China. Our economic programs are also complementary as we prioritize strategic industries such as infrastructure and innovation-driven projects. Key resources for China's critical industries also abound in the Philippines. Further, despite the current health crisis affecting the world economy, the Philippine government is confident we can overcome the challenge of COVID-19 pandemic. This is because our country has strong economic fundamentals to address the pandemic, even as we were riding a robust economic growth momentum at the start of the year, built on game-changing structural, economic, and financial reforms. To conclude, let me reiterate my thanks again to APCU for establishing this forum to serve as a platform to broaden the relationship between Philippines and China. More than just diplomacy and trade, it is our people that will serve as the bridge to grow trust and understanding between our two nations. Maraming salamat at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Secretary Mon Lopez. Madam President, is your audio fixed already?
I hope so. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Excellent.
Okay.
Ma'am,
would
would you like to would you like to start your talk?
Yes. Without much
Okay.
further ado.
Excellent, ma'am.
I've been introduced by Felix Banson, so I'd like to thank him for that. I would like to greet Ambassador Huang and Raul Lambino and greet you. Happy birthday, Jeffrey.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, and to thank you that we are here again today. And I'd like to take this opportunity also to use this forum to honor the memory of our dearly beloved departed, Rene Velasco, who revived the tradition of the Apcu Forum to promote Philippines-China understanding. So Mon Lopez has already given us the details, no, not the detail, but the data about economic and trade prospects between the Philippines and China. So I don't have to do that. First of all, remember, I'm a retired president, a private citizen, so I'm no longer up to date on all those current economic data that Mon Lopez shared with us. So what I will do is take up the invitation in the letter of Gabi Lopez to draw upon my own experiences in diplomacy and governance to put forward some insights into the future of Philippines-China relations. And Gabi's letter even said, maybe even into the term of President Duterte's successor. Our relationship with China is very important for our country. We all know that. But for me, let me cite 5 reasons why. First, geography. We're within each other's backyard. So good relations between neighbors are always a priority. Second, we're increasingly getting involved not only in bilateral dealings, but also collectively, like through ASEAN. Third, China remains the most dynamic and fast-growing economy among the major nations and may soon become the world's largest. I have a simple calculation based on the following. China's GDP of around 14 trillion was growing 6% compounded, while US of 21 trillion was growing 3% compounded. At these different growth rates, China can overtake the US in 15 years or by 2035. What is part, the World Economic Forum even has a bolder forecast. Using a statistical projection based on World Bank and IMF data, it suggests that China will catch up by 2024. And that's during the term of President Duterte's successor. But even giving or taking a few years, I think we will all live to see this. The fourth reason for why I believe our relations are so important is that domestically, there is a very vibrant Filipino-Chinese community for whom increased business dealings with China is very natural. And the fifth reason is that infrastructure continues to be very important for the Philippines. And there's no country in the world that matches China's recent track record and capability in this area. Though we're talking about the future, let me step back a bit and put things in perspective. Because indeed, we should view our relationship with China from a longer term perspective since its reform and opening up of 1978. President Cory Aquino made a state visit to China in 1988. President Fidel Ramos continued along her path and in fact was a co-founder in 1998 of the Boao Forum for Asia, where in 2018, I succeeded him as a member of the board of directors. And during my own presidency, I too followed the lead of both President Cory and President Ramos. And now President Duterte is very positive about China as well. My own reasons for following the lead of Presidents Cory and FDR were very well expressed by President Cory's statement in 1988 prior to her trip to China. At that time, she said, and I quote, "Given its size and power, its destiny as the pivot of the most important developments in Asia, its racial affinity to the Filipino nation, and its territorial proximity to us, a visit to China indeed explains and justifies itself." And now, under President Duterte, bilateral ties between the Philippines and China have reached new heights at a moment when Chinese characteristics, socialism with Chinese characteristics has entered a new era. In 2017, President Xi Jinping explained this new era, and I quote, "The Chinese nation has achieved tremendous transformation. It has stood up, become better off, and grown in strength." End of quote. On many occasions, President Xi declared that in this new era, China will open its door wider to the world. At the 75th anniversary of the UN a few days ago, President Xi pointed out that the sudden attack of COVID-19 is a great test for the entire world. He added that mankind has entered a new era of interconnectedness, with countries sharing intertwined interests and their future closely linked together. Global threats and global challenges require strong global responses. Similarly, President Duterte said that how we address COVID-19 will define our future. For the Philippines, he said, this means putting up all the peoples of our United Nations at the core of this response. Indeed, in times such as this, I believe the best attitude is to look for solutions in cooperation with as many parties and countries as possible that have things to contribute to the effort. Ambassador Wang, who is with us today to review not only China's tremendous transformation since its reform and opening up in 1978, but also how China has been helping us in this new era and the time of pandemic, has, I think, much to say about that. For my part, let me just thank him in behalf of my province of Pampanga for the Chinese embassies helping us with the traditional Chinese medicine Yang Hua Qing Wen for the treatment of COVID-19. And I look forward to China continuing with this positive approach of providing medical support. Expectedly, COVID-19 has struck the world economy. But it is not surprising that the Chinese economy, which shrunk in the first quarter of this year, bounced back in the second and third quarters. After all, since China's reform and opening up in 1978, it has proven that its approach of long-term planning and determined execution of such plans is effective. With China restarting its economy, we can expect beneficial spillover effects on the economies of its neighbors in the region, including the Philippines. And this, in a nutshell, is where economic and trade prospects between the Philippines and China are headed. Juan Lopez talked about that. Raul Lambina talked about that, especially for CESA and for North Luzon. The Philippines can continue to benefit greatly from increased flows of capital and technology from China. For example, in Pampanga, The Guangzhou Fecon Motorcycle Company will open its factory in Pampanga in 2 months' time after a 5-month delay because of COVID. And Ambassador Huang reiterated the announcement of Alibaba Cloud that they will train 50,000 local IT professionals and help 5,000 businesses in the Philippines by 2023. But let me focus on two areas that have not gained much attention among the public, but which may play a bigger role in future Philippines-China relations. This has to do with, first, China's currency, the renminbi, and second, with China's growing presence in internet sales and what they call the night economy. Let's go to the renminbi. As the China market recovers and boosts the Philippine economy, the traction of the renminbi as a main world currency will facilitate transactions between China and the Philippines. This idea has been there since 2010. At the UN, UNCTAD. At that time, UNCTAD called for the abandonment of the single major reserve currency dominated by the US dollar. 5 years later, in 2015, the IMF designated the renminbi as a main world currency, and in the following year, RMB became a world reserve currency. Those were appropriate steps because at around that time, China was already accounting for 12% of world GDP and world trade, and yet the renminbi was being used only for around 2% of global payments. So I think as the renminbi's importance catches up with the importance of China as a trade and economic partner, that will have a very big impact on our bilateral relations. So China took steps also towards this end. In 2009, it had the renminbi trade settlement pilot scheme. In 2015, it launched a cross-border interbank payment system. And in 2016, it was reported by the Global Times that China was going to grant the US a quota of 250 billion yuan under the country's renminbi qualified foreign institutional investor program. But that was all before 2016 elections. After the 2016 elections in the US, such initiatives seem to have lost momentum. Perhaps, most probably, due to changes in US policy and, of course, the serious diversions from international normalcy, such as the coronavirus. This loss of momentum, combined with the US controlling still a significant portion of the world currency transactions, have allowed politics to include in what should ideally be a purely commercial system. For example, when the US recently ended trade preference for Hong Kong, it signed a new law authorizing sanctions against Chinese officials and any banks that make significant transactions with them. But regardless of what happens between the renminbi and the dollar, the accelerating trade between the Philippines and China will make the renminbi an important currency for the Philippines. And I think this is one important feature of where Philippines-China relations are headed well into the term of President Duterte's successor, especially if the successor is politically aligned with him. Aware of this probability, it would not surprise us if his opponents raise the China bogey to get support from the other side of the Pacific Ocean. With the increasing role of the renminbi, the Philippines can benefit even more from increased capital and technology from China. Well, Ambassador Wang maybe can tell us more about how the Chinese businessmen think. But according to an article last May in the China Global Television Network, Chinese companies have become more likely to pursue exports, mergers and acquisitions, and investment opportunities outside China. And as to technology, in early March, President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech on measures for COVID-19, which included major initiatives in the development of the industrial internet, including policies for the construction of a new digital industrial infrastructure. The Philippines will also be able to learn lessons on the new normal from China's V-shaped early post-COVID-19 economic recovery. For example, we read that China's government is trying to many ways to create more job opportunities, like encouraging internet sales and the night market. I read an interview last May about how China's economy is surging amid COVID-19 lifestyle changes. The interview, which was in CGTN, described how urban Chinese are increasingly spending more time online in the late hours of the night. With the COVID-19 pandemic compelling many to work from home, this trend has further escalated, providing more opportunities for the market to capitalize on. The night economy is seen as a new growth driver to create job opportunities for local people. So I have read that many groceries, gaming stations, and bookshops follow a 24/7 schedule, while home deliveries are operational till late at night. The entrepreneur interviewed in that May piece of CGT and pointed out that it's difficult to segregate night economy into online and offline activities. He highlighted the growing trend of merger between the two categories, with more brands implementing online to offline or O2O strategies. E-commerce, for instance, has rapidly picked up. There are more activities and promotions at night. The night economy is highly encouraged by the Chinese government to boost growth. The central government and the local governments, according to the pieces we've read, are investing to support their nightlife economy, encouraging nighttime activities and events as part of their drive to kickstart the economies. Local governments have handed out vouchers in over 50 Chinese cities since mid-March via mobile apps like WeChat. Cities are planning night shows. Many businesses and services have extended opening hours. But it's important to remember that even in this night market economy, everybody is still very careful. Sanitary measures are present. Cities are adapting with increased security. Last May, Shanghai and Tianjin opened night fairs again amid strict anti-epidemic measures. The way China is implementing such novel approaches in such a large economy surely provides many lessons for smaller economies like the Philippines. The better our relationship, the better we will learn, the better we will be helped to learn. Some Apcu leaders have asked me what may be the prospects about Philippines-China relations under the successor of President Duterte. My response is I'm very optimistic. There are two main reasons for my optimism. First, as I said earlier, we have had successive presidents who have built upon the positive relations between China and the Philippines. That period 2020 to 2016 was just an interruption from 1978 up to today. Thus, we have good momentum. The second reason for my optimism is a very vibrant community of Filipino Chinese, particularly in the business sector. It's providential that now Jeffrey Nang is the president of Apcu, and it comes from a very vibrant Filipino Chinese business family. I saw also, even before this, there's the Filipino Chinese community of Cebu, and they were the ones who put up in Cebu. So Rene Velasco was a professor. So he promoted understanding by reviving the Apcu Forum. I'm optimistic that now Jeffrey can help translate the understanding we've been gathering into a new normal in our people-to-people relations with China. I would like to conclude my remarks with a sentiment that throughout the history of my involvement with Apcu, and that's indeed a very long time, 1977, 1976, Philippines, though now Philippines-China relations are at a golden age, still there has never been a time that China needed our friendship and understanding more than it needs today. As I said, I date my association with Apcu back to the 1970s, the height of the Cold War. But even back then, China did not look for friends. President Nixon began the process of normalizing relations with China in 1972, and then China opened up in earnest in 1978. However, recently, a series of issues are unfortunately turning the opinion of some against China. Here in the Philippines, there is the South China Sea. There is Pogo, which ironically, the Chinese government is against. And now there is coronavirus, which some blame on China based more on emotion rather than on reason. Our national interest will never be 100% congruent with that of China. But that's just the way it is in global politics. However, there is much more that binds us to China as friends than what divides us. Thus, Apcu has never been more relevant and important in promoting Philippines-China relations than it is today, regardless of who will be the next president. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And now, to introduce our other keynote speaker, can I call on former Apcu President, Professor Gabi Lopez. Gabi, you have the floor.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Happy to see you. And I'm privileged to welcome our Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Ambassador Wang Jilian, who was born in the month of September 1967. So happy birth month, Mr. Ambassador. He finished his Bachelor of Arts in Beijing Foreign Studies University, got his Master of Arts with distinction at the University of Manchester, 1989 to 1990. He became a staff member of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Chinese government. He was also staff member attaché at the Department of Asian Affairs and became attaché, third secretary at the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in Negara, Brunei, Darussalam. In 1997 to 2002, he was third secretary, and then second secretary, and then deputy director at the Department of Asian Affairs. And in 2002 to 2005, he was second secretary and first secretary at the Chinese Embassy in India. In 2007 to 2008, he became the Deputy Chief of Mission and Political Counselor in the Chinese Embassy in Brunei. And in 2008 to 2010, he became Political Counselor at the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in Washington, D.C., United States of America. In 2010 to 2012, he was Deputy Chief of Mission and Political Counselor at the Chinese Embassy in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. In 2012 to 2014, he became counselor at the Department of Asian Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And in 2014 to 2018, he became Deputy Director General, Department of Asian Affairs, and in 2018 to 2019, he became Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of China to the ASEAN. And in 2019, he was appointed ambassador to the people, to the Republic of the Philippines. Ambassador Wang is married with one son. So without much further ado, Ambassador Wang, it is your turn to address us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lopez, for your kind introduction. And Your Excellency, former President and Chairperson Emeritus of Association of Philippine-China Understanding, Glorious Magapagal Arroyo, and Honorable Ramon Lopez, Secretary of Trade and Industry of the Philippines, Honorable Secretary Raul Lambino, Chairman of Apcu, and Mr. Jeffrey An, the Apcu President, and happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
And Honorable Percival Prata, Apcu Secretary General, distinguished experts and scholars, dear friends, good afternoon to all of you. I'm very delighted to meet all of you online and share my view about China's development and China-Philippine relations against the backdrop of the pandemic. At the outset, I wish to thank Apcu for organizing this webinar. And my special thanks go to former President Arroyo and Secretary Lopez for your insightful speech and message, which inspires to further strengthen China-Philippine relations. And I'm particularly grateful and share with the optimism of former President about China-Philippine relations. And I would also like to pay tribute to all experts, scholars, and friends who have long been dedicated to China-Philippine relations. Next week, we are going to celebrate the 71st anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Rejoicing at the festive occasion brings back me the memories of my loved hometown, a 1,000-year-old village in Fujian province, which is just across the sea facing the Philippines. When I was a little boy, poverty prevailed in the village, and some fellow villagers were even short of food and clothes. And over the past few decades, tremendous changes have taken place. Today, my fellow villagers not only have sufficient food and clothes and fashionable clothes, but also own cars and houses in a very nice neighborhood. Their village has also been urbanized with the establishment of extensive transportation network and manufacturing factories without compromising ecological improvement. The story of my hometown is a miniature of China's development over the past few decades. China has completed the industrialization process in decades that developed countries have gone through for hundreds of years. Since it was founded in 1949, especially in the past 4 decades since we formed and opened up, China has grown into the world's second largest economy and a manufacturing giant equipped with a complete range of industries from scratch, contributing to over 30% to global growth for the past 10 plus years in a row, and over 70% to global poverty reduction. Pondering on such remarkable developments and changes, people frequently ask me how China could make it reality. Three key factors have come to my mind, and I would like to share with you my thoughts on them. First, China owes its development achievement to the leadership of the Communist Party of China, CPC. The aspiration and mission of CPC is to fulfill the Chinese people's pursuit of happiness and rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Following the principle of friend the people and for the people, CPC has built close bonds with the people, just like flesh and blood, fish and water. Latest opinion polling conducted by Pew Research and Harvard University revealed that over 90% of Chinese citizen respondents were satisfied with Chinese government, and this rate ranked among the top worldwide. Second, China has committed to the path of peaceful development. Former President of the US, Jimmy Carter, used to compare the US with China, concluding that the US has only enjoyed 16 years of peace in its 242-year history, making the US the most warlike nation in the history of the world. While China has been at peace and has sensibly invested in infrastructure to achieve breakneck growth. I cannot agree more with his insight. Since its founding of the People's Republic, China has never provoked a war nor occupied an inch of others' land. For the past 3 decades, China's defense expenditure as a percentage of the GDP has remained below 2%, far behind that of the US and other major countries in the world. Third, China has been empowered by the great Chinese people. What we have achieved in the past 71 years is not a godsend, still less a gift from others. It derives from the hard work, wisdom, and courage of Chinese people from all walks of life. President Xi Jinping has encouraged Chinese people to strive for better life by saying, let us roll up sleeves and go full speed ahead with hard work. Some foreign friends also commented that no wonder China could achieve such an impressive development since the Chinese people have spent other people's coffee and beer time on working. Inevitably, the highly compressed industrialization process also made us encounter growing pains. We are all aware that China is still a developing country with such problems to be solved as unbalanced and inadequate development, disparity in income distribution, and environment awaits better protection. It is our belief that development holds the key to resolving all the problems, and we will be dedicated to continuously building a prosperous, democratic, civilized, harmonious, and beautiful China. Dear friends, as President Xi mentioned in his remarks at the high-level meeting to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the UN 4 days ago, quote, major changes unseen in a century are taking place in our world. The sudden attack of the COVID-19 is a grave test for the entire world. Mankind has entered a new era of interconnectedness, with countries sharing intertwined interests and their future closely linked together, unquote. Faced with such challenges, countries around the world now stand at crossroads and need to make a crucial choice, a choice between building bridges and building walls, between openness and seclusion, between cooperation and confrontation. It is saddening to see that the superpower, disregarding the trend of history, has been stoking ideology confrontation internationally, publicly coercing countries into choosing sides and sabotaging international cooperation against the pandemic for its own political gains. These acts are threatening to push the interdependent and stable world into the brink of turmoil and division. No country has the right to dominate global affairs, control the destiny of others, or keep advantages in development or to itself. Even less should one be allowed to do whatever it likes and be the hegemon, bully, or boss of the world. As a responsible major country, China is resolutely dedicated to safeguarding the world's peace and development and building a community with a shared future for mankind. We will continue to uphold multilateralism, international system centered on the UN, expand mutually beneficial cooperation, and jointly tackle the COVID-19 pandemic and other global challenges with the international community at our best. Action speaks louder than words. It is not hard to tell which countries stand on the right side of the history and which ones move against the trend towards peace, development, and win-win cooperation of the times. Deeply integrated in the historical, cultural, and economic bonds, China and neighboring countries share a future that is ever more intertwined. A prosperous China is it is indispensable part of the collective rejuvenation of Asian countries, and also represents the shared vision of developing countries around the globe. The ongoing crisis has intensified pressure and challenges for regional countries, yet looking for another perspective also has brought a missed opportunity for us to strengthen unity, mutual assistance, and common development. So what we did amid crisis in the past. The Philippines is on the track to become an upper middle income country with its economic development and industrial optimization approaching a very critical turning point. Therefore, it is pivotal for the Philippines to mount over the situation so as not to miss the trend of the times. As I always believe that the Philippines' future will not floating anywhere, but will be deeply rooted in its own national development, in a stable and ethical neighborhood, and in a peaceful and prosperous Asian region. Dear friends, this year marks the 45th anniversary of China-Philippine diplomatic relations. As a Chinese proverb goes, only friendship built on sincerity can endure. For 45 years, profound friendship and win-win cooperation have always been the main theme of bilateral relations. Under the leadership of President Xi Jinping and President Duterte, China-Philippine relations have been moving along the upward trajectory and ushering in the new golden age. Mutually political trust, practical cooperation, and people-to-people exchanges have been continuously strengthened and deepened, which have not only benefited the two peoples, but also contributed to regional stability and prosperity. Facing common challenges of the COVID-19, both countries have spared no efforts to support and assist each other, nurturing a closer partnership between our new two countries in the new era. In order to further broaden new prospects and scale new heights for bilateral relations. I believe China and the Philippines should properly handle and answer the following four questions. Firstly, how to navigate China-Philippine relations toward the right direction. China and the Philippines are close neighbors. As we Chinese often say, close neighbors are better than relatives far away. Our amicable ties should not be overset or weakened by by some particular differences or disputes. Nothing but good neighborly friendship and mutually beneficial cooperation meets the fundamental interest of the two countries and peoples, which has been solidified during our joint fight against the COVID-19. The important consensus reached between President Xi and President Duterte, such as putting aside maritime disputes, managing the situation through bilateral consultations, and enhancing dialogue and cooperation, have to be vigorously implemented by both sides so that the sound momentum of our relations as guideposts to the way forward could be preserved and enhanced. Secondly, in the COVID-19 new normal and post-pandemic era, how to enhance China-Philippine cooperation across the board. Both China and Philippines have been striving for economic development and social progress, with the unique advantages of geographical adjacency and complementary economic structures. The two countries are each other's salient trade and development partners, despite the fact that global trade and cooperation has been battered severely amid the pandemic. The total value of China's newly signed contracts of projects in the Philippines still score an increase of 26.5% in the first half of this year, which highlights the huge potential of bilateral relations. As one of the first countries to stem the spread of the COVID-19, China has steadily revived its economy. The Chinese economy is picking up momentum. To be the first major economy bouncing back to the growth, with its GDP expanding by 3.2% year-on-year in the second quarter, and foreign trade rising by 6%, and exports rising by 11.6% in August. China will continue to engage with Philippines in joint COVID-19 prevention and control, and exchange experience on resumption of work and production. We should step up efforts for the establishment of the fast lane for urgently needed personnel exchanges and green corridor for logistics, so as to ensure stable industrial and supply chains. China stands ready to further synergize the Belt and Road Initiative and Build program and accelerate the implementation of cooperation projects to stimulate economic recovery and growth of the Philippines. We also seize the new opportunities highlighted amid the pandemic to strengthen such digital economic cooperation areas as 5G, big data, AI, to foster new growth drivers for bilateral relations, bilateral cooperation, and our economies, respectively. Thirdly, how to properly handle the differences between the two countries. It is just normal to have differences among friends, best friends. What matters is how we handle and manage those differences. The South China Sea issue is only a smart part of China-Philippine relations. Or as Foreign Secretary Lok Sin put it, just a little pebble on the avenue leading to our mutually beneficial economic progress. And we mustn't stumble over the little pebble. In April 1988, the late Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping told the visiting Philippine President Cory Aquino that Quote, in view of the friendly relations between our two countries, we can put aside the issue for some time being and take the approach of joint development, unquote. Dialogue mechanisms such as the bilateral consultation mechanism between our two countries are working well to manage differences and explore practical cooperation. With the joint efforts of China and ASEAN countries, including the Philippines, the consultation of the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea has been proceeding steadily despite the COVID-19 challenges. This proves that regional countries, including China and the Philippines, have the capability and wisdom to manage differences without compromising bilateral relations and regional stability. Countries enjoy freedom of navigation in the South China Sea in accordance with the international law. We should not allow external powers to roil the waters in the South China Sea, nor derail the sound development of China-Philippine relations. History has time and again taught us bitter lessons that intervention of external powers could only bring tears and fire, turmoil and unrest to regional countries at the end of the day, which would be the last thing we would like to see. Peace and stability in China is China's utmost strategic interest in the South China Sea, which also serves as the common fundamental interest of ASEAN countries, including the Philippines. Nothing could get in our way to work together to overcome external disruptions and safeguard peace and stability in this region. Last but not least, how to present a real China to our Filipino friends. Frankly speaking, I often read the media reports and remarks of some politicians with a heavy heart, which seem to customarily focused on the negative and often inaccurate or even biased views about China and the Chinese people. Some organizations and individuals even took it as political correctness to discredit or even demonize China out of ulterior political motives, which severely undermines amicable sentiments between our two peoples. There was some roughness and misleading accusations going on, such as the so-called Chinese project security threat, China debt trap, and China disrupted the COC consultation. In fact, there was no any evidence that Chinese projects threatened the Philippines' security. Instead, these projects are contributing to your national building. Amid the pandemic, Chinese enterprises in the Philippines have actively committed to social responsibilities by donating millions of pieces of well-needed medical supplies to the local governments and hospitals. They have also proceeded steadily with a good coordination of pandemic prevention and work resumption, which contribute to the economic recovery and social stability in the Philippines. According to the latest statistics, about 50 large-scale Chinese enterprises based in the Philippines have employed more than 18,000 Filipinos so far. And the number is expected to increase in the coming years. As for China debt, the BSP has already disclosed that loans from China only accounts for merely 0.65% of the country's total debt. Even if all the planned financing were implemented, the figure will only be around 4.5% by 2022, still much lower than that of other major foreign lenders. On the COC consultation, China's being sincere in attitude and firm in resolve. It was our Premier, Li Keqiang, who proposed in 2018 to conclude the consultation within 3 years. China is committed to speed up COC consultations with ASEAN countries and looks forward to achieving substantive progress within the Philippines coordinatorship for China-ASEAN dialogue relations so as to promote the peace and stability in the South China Sea. Mutual understanding and good faith between our two peoples have to be further enhanced through extensive people-to-people exchanges and interactions, and boycott rumor mongering that slander China-Philippine relations. Given that personnel visits and face-to-face communication are restricted, we should extend online channel for strengthening exchanges between political parties, Congress, local governments, media, think tanks of our two countries to foster a favorable atmosphere for the China-Philippine relations to grow from strength to strength. Dear friends, in the telephone call between our two presidents last June, President Xi said, history will prove that friendship between China and the Philippines serves the fundamental interest and long-term interest of the two countries and peoples. Keeping abreast of the trend of the times and seizing development opportunities will surely bring us an ever brighter future. Let us join hands now and make concrete efforts to further deepen the relationship of comprehensive strategic cooperation for common development and prosperity. Thank you and Mahai. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very good speech, Mr. Ambassador. And now we'll go to the open forum. We have asked several of our Apcu officers and directors to give their questions the past few minutes. And I will direct the first question to President Arroyo. Madam President, here's a question. No? With the impending decoupling of the US-China economic ties, the US now treats China as a strategic competitor. It has banned Huawei, TikTok, WeChat from the US. What do you think are its effects on the Philippine economy?
Well, I think our economic relations with China are not dependent on their relations with each other. So what's banned in the US is not banned in the Philippines. So I think that we go on with our relations. The important thing is the relationship between the two of us.
Thank you, Madam President. One question for Ambassador Huang. Mr. Ambassador, the President a few days ago brought up the issue of the Hague Tribunal ruling before the UN General Assembly. Do you think this will in any way affect Philippine diplomatic relations with China?
Thank you. China's position on the so-called Apcu ruling has been very clear. We do not participate, we do not accept, and we do not recognize this so-called ruling. And as it has been agreed by our two presidents that we should close the old chapter and shelve differences. At the same time, we should work together to pursue cooperation and dialogue in our bilateral relations. We hope that we both sides will implement the consensus between our two leaders so that to maintain the sound momentum of cooperation between our two countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Madam President, since the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been 200,000 deaths in the US. The federal government does not seem to be able to get along with the local governments, the state governments in handling this COVID pandemic. Whereas in the case of China, it has successfully locked down Wuhan and virtually wiped out COVID-19 in China. Do you think there are lessons for us in the Philippines about how the US and China handled the COVID-19 pandemic?
Oh, definitely, there are lessons. And since China has done such a good job, there is much that we can learn from China. And there's also a lot of assistance that China is offering to us that we can take advantage of. Now, on well, for instance, there is I mentioned already that China is helping Pampanga with the medicines. There is a vaccine forthcoming. So, as I said earlier in my main statements, we should learn as many lessons and accept as much help from the rest of the world because even in the United Nations, everybody talked about how we all have to work together and learn from one another with regard to how to address COVID.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Ambassador, we have a question from our SecGen, Attorney Peralta. His question is, the U.S. Congress has threatened to stop all military aid and sales of military equipment to the Philippines. Do you think China would be ready and willing to step in to the Philippines to help us with our military equipment?
Yes, being our position that in international relations, one should not interfere in the domestic affairs of the other countries. As for China-Philippine relations, we are committed to develop all-round cooperation and mutually beneficial cooperation with the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Madam President, what do you envision how Apcu can be more active in promoting people-to-people relations between the people of the Philippines and the people of China, especially now that we have Ambassador Huang here?
Well, I mentioned earlier about one of the reasons why I'm optimistic about our future relations is because there is already a very active Filipino-Chinese business community here. And I think it's providential, Jeff, that you're the president now.
Thank you.
It was providential when it was Rene Velasco in his time because he had organized a lot of this forum that made us understand Philippines-China relations more. I think at this stage we have come to understand it more than let's say before all of these forums became very frequent. And now we have a world that is facing new economic challenges. And as Ambassador Huang said, China is the first major country to develop to recover. And China has the wherewithal to assist the rest of us, not only in capital and technology, but also in sharing best practices. So this is where I think Apcu and the new breed of leadership, which is made up of young businessmen, Filipino Chinese businessmen, can help develop this relationship. And I think it will be a trade and economic relationship driven relationship coming into the future. The other thing is we have to work not only on your generation, but on the next generation, because there's really much to learn from China's success in the last 40 years or more than 40 years. 1978 up to 2018, China showed how its unified vision and its long-term planning and its success in implementing the plan made it very successful, so that it brought 800 million people out of poverty in 40 years, in one generation. Now, again, China is showing the way by being the first major country to recover from the recession of COVID. So there is much that our young generation, younger than even you, can learn from China's vision and consistency and ability to execute plans. So I have, you know, during Gabi Lopez's time, we started this project about bringing young people, young Filipinos to China at that time, so they could learn about how China did it over the last 40 years. And we were able to bring young people to Chengdu. I was able to bring young people to Guangzhou, and they were able to ride the 45-minute train from Hong Kong to Guangzhou. They were able to go to the Canton Tower. They were able to see so many of the modern developments that were 40 years ago, just small villages. Gabi Lopez and I traveled to China in the 1970s, before the reform and opening up. And we went all around China for 12 days, mostly by train. And Ambassador Huang was saying that we should now invite some young people to go to China and follow the same route as Gabi Lopez and I did, so that we can give them a running annotation of how was it 45 years ago compared to now. And through the tour, we will be learning many lessons on visioning, on consistency over the long term, on the ability to carry out. I think we should continue doing that. So we've already gotten success in making the young business community very active in Apcu. I think we can also continue the work that Rene Velasco did in getting students to be active in Apcu. So we take care of your generation and the generation after yours. And that's a lot of continuing work for Apcu to do.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Ambassador, perhaps you would like to continue some suggestions on how APCU can work with the Chinese Embassy and the Chinese government to further promote people-to-people relations.
Yes, thank you, Jeffrey, for a question. I think that's Apcu has been doing a great job in promoting mutual understanding between our two peoples. And in the new era, there are yet more work to be done. And I think that's to present a real China to the Philippine people, especially the youth. They called it Z generation, the young generation, is extremely important. So we hoped Apcu will play an even bigger role in present this kind of real China to the young generation. Since China has been changing so fast, even myself, when I go back to my hometown, sometimes I could not recognize, because great change always takes place after a few years. And the understanding of some Filipino friends of China has been their perception of their parents many years ago, or has been the perception of some, Western media who has some biased views. So I think it's very important to make Chinese, the real China, be understood, and the voice of Chinese be heard by all Filipino friends, especially the youth. And of course, on the other way, to introduce the Philippines to China, since the majority of Philippine people are very friendly to Chinese people. And I believe we also need to make Chinese people better understanding of what is going on in the Philippines, a country which is full of dynamic and full of the kind of the former sentiments towards China. So I think that's in the new normal, we need to do more activities like the webinar today to bring our peoples together, and that will be very important in the future. And as always, myself and my embassy will be ready to do whatever we can help to make your activities a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Madam President. This ends our open forum for this afternoon. And now for our closing remarks, I would like to call on Apcu Vice Chairman, Mr. Sixto Benedicto.
I'd like to greet our president a very happy birthday first. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Jeff. As the Vice Chairman of the Association of Philippines-China Understanding, I would like to formally close this convivial virtual occasion by expressing the utmost gratitude to commendable individuals who exerted efforts in making this event successful. To our honorable guest speakers, former President Lord Hapagal Arroyo, Chair Emeritus of Apcu, and to the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the People's Republic of China, His Excellency Wang Xilian, together with the staff of Chinese Embassy, Secretary Ramon Lopez of DTI, thank you for lending us time. Also to my co-officials of Apcu and guests from different organizations who stand as witnesses to this insightful and active conference. This forum aims to view the clear path of where the Philippines-China relations are headed, as well as the China's development and the China-Philippine relations from the perspective of two reputable guests whom we know are experts in this topic. With the help of our noble guest speakers today, we are able to unfold plans that will provide great and beneficial outcomes for both Philippines and China, bring the relation of both parties into wider understanding. The constant affiliation of both parties in different agendas will escalate the level of connection between Philippines and China. Furthermore, we are grateful to know that China is always there to reach us out with a helping hand. Apcu will surely express great support in different developments of China in their respective expertise. This will surely provide substantial outcomes that will be valuable to both parties. As we continue to corroborate to ideas as simple as it may be, it can lead us to a groundbreaking change that will continuously make the Philippines-China relationship stronger. Moreover, before closing this meeting, let me share this to you. Camaraderie is one of the best assets that both parties can offer. To reach the full potential of the Philippine-China relations, I do believe that the bond of Philippines and China is directly proportional to time. As the time increases, our bond is getting stronger and stronger. Looking back from where we started, we can say that we've come a long way, but this is not the end. This is just the start of something. This is the start of greater breakthrough that both Philippines and China will achieve together. Long live and prosper the camaraderie between Philippines and China. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Sixto. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Ambassador Huang.
President.
We would like to end today's Zoom forum. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we look forward to having you again in our future forum. Again, thank you for attending today's Apcu forum. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Felix, how are you, Felix?